Next up is the fiscal year 25 budget actions. Mr. Rare.
All right, so tonight we'll continue the discussion talking about estimated property values that we receive from our appraisal district, our tax compression that we're forecasting for next year, as well as a budget forecast for fiscal year 25. And so we're continuing to use the April property value estimate that we provided last month. The main reason for that is in May, that's when you have a lot of protests. And so the values, right now I believe, looking at our most recent estimate, there were upwards to 40 to 45%, maybe a little bit higher, that was under protest at this time. And so there's really not a lot of value that can be taken with the May estimates, and so that's why we go back to the April estimates before the protests started to take place. So you'll see our estimated value on there that we're projecting, as well as where the April values were, and then we're estimating a slight decrease from the April values to what we actually receive when we get the certified values in July. And then on the tax rate history, we've seen pretty sizable tax compression over the last few years as we've seen sizable property value growth throughout the state and also the district. Right now, we're not forecasting much tax compression for fiscal year 25, so you'll see it shows the M&O rate, it's pretty much remaining flat. So there's very, very small compression for next year. And then on the budget forecast side, just kind of a reminder, the revenue forecast assumptions that we're currently using. We're using enrollment projection of 48,100. That's a slight decrease from this year. So at snapshot date for this year, we're at 44,440. And then our estimated ADA, we're using 93% of our projected enrollment. And so just kind of looking at previous year's trends, we think that's going to give us a better estimate on where we think our ADA actually will end up. And so last year we were at 45,207. That's how we ended up for fiscal year 24. At this time, those are the most recent estimates that we have. And so that would be a decrease of about 474 for our ADA for next year. Property values, we have our current projected certified estimate, and we'll continue to update that and then finalize that once we receive our July values. And then, as I mentioned, our tax rate, very small decrease for next year. As we're all aware, no change to the basic allotment, and then a very small increase in the Tier 2 golden penny yield. And then on the expenditure side, we're currently projecting, based on the values that we're using right now, recapture payment of $13.9 million, payroll continuing to use a fill rate of 98%. The salary budget projection will be finalized, or I guess the first initial projection will come in mid-June. So we'll have a better estimate on what our salaries look like mid-June. On the other anticipated increases that we have in there for utilities, insurance, contracts, we'll continue to firm those numbers up as we move through the summer and we work with those vendors. And then the initial budget forecast, as a reminder, so initially we were looking at a deficit of $14.1 million for next year. After we've been working on cost reductions for the last few months, and so now we're looking at budget deficit forecast right now of $8.4 million. And that could change, as I mentioned, as we continue to look at updated salary numbers. We'll continue to adjust that, and as well as what our certified property values will do to that. And so at this time, our next steps would be to update with our certified values in July to make sure that we complete all the information that we need for TEA on the property value study, but then also working with them to receive our maximum compressed tax rate that we can adopt in August. And then we'll continue meeting with the Community Efficiency Committee, and then continue any advocacy efforts that we can for fiscal year 25.
All right. Any questions, comments? Dr. Parker.
Thank you, Madam President. When I was a classroom teacher, if all of my students failed a test, I usually looked at me at that point. Something I did or something with the test wasn't working if all of my students failed. And I say that because if you look around at districts across the state, we are by no means alone in adopting a deficit budget. Our colleagues are having to make some of the same decisions that we're having to make. And yet, there's a narrative out there about how districts manage their money. To me, that sounds a lot like blaming the students for all failing the test.
Are there any other comments or questions? I have a question for one of the assumptions of 99% collection. Having just seen that we were 14 million short for this year, I mean, how confident are you that those numbers are? And I know that these are projections, but that's where my concern lies.
Yeah, based on our trends over the last few years, I'm pretty confident that we'll still be at 99%.
Dr. Rapp.
You know, one of the things is I think about what we heard tonight with the presentation about Knight High School, and obviously, you know, several things have allowed us to get to an $8.5 million deficit down from the forecasted $14 million. We talked about budgetary savings from the substitute difference, right? We also talked about with our staff before they left the middle school schedule changes. And we know ultimately that we're looking at those low enrollment electives and that we're right sizing as our enrollment decreases. But you really, as your budget assumption goes down about your enrollment, your recapture goes up. And so that causes some of the gains that you make with budget changes when you consider all the hard work to pull back budgets and really not be able to do some things that we've been able to do. That drop in enrollment and that increase in recapture takes away a little bit of that progress that you've made. We absolutely have said over and over again that, you know, these are changes that we're being forced to make, some changes that instructionally and support-wise we do not want to have to make. And I said on a phone call with superintendents today, and absolutely, adopting deficit budgets, adding to their deficits, going into fund balance in order to provide compensation. And the next item I know you all have to talk about, and we talked about last month, was, you know, where we are on compensation, and benefits are going up. And if there's not a raise, and what does that do to people's paycheck as benefits are going up? And I just think it's important to underscore, I know we have continued work to do as we face that $8.5 million deficit. I appreciate so very much all of your support as we've navigated these challenges, because I know we have staff that are doing their best to handle them well and with professionalism and to rally. But I just continue to say to people, you know, and to our staff and our community that things have got to change in the legislature. And what we talked about as superintendents today is that there is sitting, and y'all have referenced the surplus, roughly $750 per student is what was allocated that was not distributed. That's sitting up there and that wasn't distributed to public schools. $750 per student, which would make a huge difference in all of our budgets. So thank you all for walking this path, and I appreciate all of the comments to the team that's rallied so hard to pull back their budgets.
All right. With that, the preview draft of compensation resolution for 2024-25. Mr. Rare.
So, you know, as a result of what has been discussed tonight, that there was no legislative action to increase the basic allotment, no additional funding has been provided for districts to make staff or salary increases for staff without dipping into fund balance, as Dr. Rapp mentioned. And so included on page 173 of your board book is a one-time payment resolution that could provide a compensation increase for staff depending on the results of the district's financial audit for fiscal year 2024. And so captured in that resolution are some of the items that we've discussed at previous board meetings, to looking at either the possibility of a one-time pay or a midpoint salary increase, as well as a one-time pay. And so there's different options that are included in that resolution for the board to consider.
Are there any questions, comments? All right. We will